Again, every time I get the mic, I do this because I feel that I have to, because other people probably won't. But I just want to thank Ken Longo for the job that he's doing, because it is an unbelievably difficult job to be the chairman of any local committee, and I just want to thank Ken for his hard work. We're all conservatives, but sometimes we're not easy to deal with. But listen, ladies and gentlemen, I was honored to be here today to speak on behalf of a very good friend of mine, Rob Bell, who you're going to hear about today. A lot of you know I have 3 small boys, and Saturday mornings are very, very sacred in our house. To be able to wake up with them, have breakfast, and you know, to actually have family time that I didn't have during the week. But when I heard that Rob was coming, I called him and said, Rob, I'd like to introduce you, if you don't mind. We sit together, we're seatmates on the Courts of Justice Committee. We sit next to each other, and there's a significance there. Because what most people get to see is they get to see the open Rob Bell, the public Rob Bell, the votes that Rob Bell makes, or we make. I get to talk to Rob sitting next to him on the committee, and we get to talk about issues and ideas and things that don't come up most of the time, but just the behind the scenes things that we talk about. And let me tell you something. There is not one person in the House of Delegates that is consistently fighting for the conservative values that we share like Rob Bell. He not only says it publicly, he does it privately. When the liberal groups come to see me, because I'm fortunate to be on the civil law subcommittee, and he's the chairman for the criminal law courts committee. But when they come to me, and the liberal groups come to me, and they say they want to reduce penalties on sexual predators, which, shockingly enough, people do come to us and ask us to reduce penalties on sexual predators. I'll look at the bill and I'll chuckle, because I know it'll go through his subcommittee. And I literally chuckled. I said, do you really think you're going to get Rob Bell to endorse this and sign off on this? Because I know that what he's going to do is tirelessly fight for the conservative values that we share, and he has done it consistently. He is also the chairman of the Crime Commission. This is a commission that looks over ideas and issues to bring to the General Assembly the next year. And you know that conservative ideas are going to come out of that, the Crime Commission with Rob Bell. And he's also, as I mentioned, the chairman of the Criminal Court Subcommittee. But one of the things you don't know yet, and that he might speak about, is that he is going to be carrying the second version of the eminent domain resolution next year. Let's give him a hand for that. We were honored to have Johnny Joanno do it last year, and we all supported that resolution last year, but Rob Bell is carrying it this year. It's an issue that he worked out with Johnny Joanno, and they're all fine with it. So he will be the face of the eminent domain resolution next year. And I have to say this just as a personal aside. Should the position of Attorney General become open because Ken Cuccinelli is going to run for a different office, whatever that might be, but if that position is open, I'm telling you now, I will wholeheartedly throw my support behind Rob Bell for Attorney General. So ladies and gentlemen, if you would please, Delegate Rob Bell.
Good morning. It is a real excitement for me to come down. We came down from Charlottesville this morning. I was a little early this morning to come down and see you. And my name is Rob Bell. I'm the delegate from Albemarle County, which is the county near Charlottesville. And I'm from a Navy family. My dad was a CV for 28 years, and so we moved all around the country when I was coming up. And then when I was in high school, he was in Virginia, so I went to UVA. And then he moved out from under me and went to Texas, and so I just stayed. I stayed in Charlottesville, and 20 years later, I'm the delegate from Charlottesville. What I want to do is talk to you this morning about the criminal laws, the upcoming election, and leave lots of time for your questions. I think that I was a prosecutor for 5 years before I got elected, and 2,400 cases, a lot of time with people who were criminals who got convicted, went to prison. And my conclusions were actually probably similar to what your conclusions would be about what makes for a good criminal law, which would be it has to hold the criminal accountable. He did it, we got to hold him accountable. And we got to keep the public safe. And most laws, of course, do both. And what I want to do is first give you some good news about some laws we did pass, and then sort of give you the bad news about all the other stuff we'd like to do that we can't. So I'll start with two good examples, two things that I think you'll be happy to hear. So the first comes out of a case that was near me. It was up in Madison County, Virginia. It's a small rural county. And they were having a Christmas pageant. And the Christmas pageant, they wanted to have Santa Claus actually come into the school. And they found a gentleman who lived nearby, and you can see this picture on the internet. He's very heavy set, he has a long white beard. And they put him in a Santa Claus suit, they brought him into the school, and he went classroom to classroom, and I know there's some school board members here, and right now you should start shaking your head at this story, because what they did was only after he went through the school, the parents looked him up on the sex offender registry and found that, yes, indeed, he just finished a 20-year sentence in prison. He had 10 sex offenses, including 4 rapes. Okay, so the parents were just outraged, absolutely as mad as they could be. But they were a lot more outraged when they discovered that there was no law to forbid this. There was nothing on the books. He couldn't be punished. He'd done nothing wrong. In fact, unless things were changed, he could come back the next day. And so they came to us and said, somebody's got to get that changed. Something's got to happen. And the good news is, I think, hopefully everyone in this room will agree, is that we did change it. And we made it illegal for someone who's a violent sex offender to go on school property. If they do, they go to jail. So that's an example of a law that was a problem. People brought it to our attention, and we fixed it. I'll give another good example before we get to the bad news. There was a case in Charlottesville that probably made the papers here as a student who killed another student. They were both lacrosse players. Terrible case. He was her boyfriend. When he drank, he was violent. And after one too many times of drinking too much, he went to her apartment, broke down her door, and he killed her. And the murder case is working its way through the system. But one of the things that, as we reviewed the case afterwards, we recognized that it was very, very hard for her to get a protective order in Virginia because she wasn't married to him, she didn't have a baby with him, she didn't live with him. Those are kind of the ways you get a protective order in Virginia. And again, people said, what are you doing? Why is it so hard? Sometimes boyfriends are scary. Sometimes boyfriends are threatening. And so again, we worked on it for a year and we got it changed. And so now, there aren't many young women in this room, but if your daughters or granddaughters or anyone in this room needs a protective order from somebody that you're not married to, don't live with, you can get one. So it's another example, I think, of a law that I hope you're happy with. Those are the laws we worked on that are good news. And let me just pause to say, 2 of the people that helped get those things passed, especially the protective order, right here in this room. So you gave us Sal, you gave us Barry, they voted for those things. Sal's on the committee, Sal helped write them. And then Barry's just given us some common sense votes. Without them, we could not get it passed. So, thank you. Thanks for sending us some good conservative. Now, here's the bad news. We got a bunch more good ideas that we would help make Virginia a safer place, and we can't get them passed. They pass the House, and they do not pass the Senate. And I always hate it when people just toss out generalities, so let me give you 3 specific examples. I'll give 4. 4 examples of things we think are good ideas that we just can't seem to get through the Senate. So, we believe, in the House, we believe that when you're arrested, we ought to check your immigration status, so that if you're legally here, when we're done with you, we might be able to send you home. Pass the House, fail in the Senate. We believe that sanctuary cities are a bad idea. We say that localities shouldn't be able to just opt out of America's immigration laws. It helps create the magnet to bring people here. And by the way, the troubles don't stay in that sanctuary city. It goes out to other places. So we had a law, or a proposal that said, let's abolish sanctuary cities in Virginia. All of us voted for it. Passed the House, failed the Senate. Virginia's death penalty has a limitation. It's called the trigger man rule. It means unless you pull the trigger, there's a couple of exceptions, but unless you pull the trigger, you cannot get the death penalty. Charles Manson would not have gotten the death penalty in Virginia because he was not the trigger man. He organized it, he caused it, he created the problem, but he's not the trigger man. It's a strange rule. Often the person that organized it is worse than the trigger man. Again, we said, let's get rid of it. These 2 guys voted for it, passed the House, failed the Senate. Sal has a bill he's brought how many times? 5 times, 5 years in a row. Sal has an idea. There's this new technology on drunk drivers. So you get convicted of drunk driving, but you want to have a license to go to work. Okay, we understand the need. There's a device called an ignition interlock device, which won't let the car turn on if you can't breathe clean air into it. And a few minutes down the road, if you can't breathe in again, it will shut your car off. It's called an ignition interlock device. Other states have it. Sal has a bill that says, fine, if you get a DUI, you want a restricted license, you got to have an ignition interlock device. Pass the House, fail the Senate. And right about now, you're probably thinking, why is the House so smart? Why is the Senate so stupid? And they're not stupid, they just don't agree with us. And I think if you come to these breakfasts every week, I'm sure you've heard this from other speakers, it's just the House is controlled by Republicans, and Democrats control the Senate. It's 22 to 18. We are just 2 votes shy. 2 votes would tie it up, bowling would break ties in our favor, 3 votes would mean we take the Senate. And so just, I'm going to everything you could possibly do. I know you have one seat locally, just a couple of precincts, but you got the Northam seat. Anything you can do to get us those last couple of votes. And let me not stop there. Maybe crime, I'm here about crime, but maybe crime is not your thing. So let me give you a few other things that don't pass the Senate either. We have a very, is anybody on VRS? Anybody has a pension, Virginia pension system? Okay. Our pension system is $17 billion in the hole. To put that in perspective, because we're used to federal money that's so enormous, our entire state general fund is about $17 billion a year. So if we shut down the schools, didn't build roads, closed the prisons, closed UVA, didn't pay out of Medicaid, if we did all of those things for a whole year, that's how much our pension fund is in the hole. We took very hard vote on the House side because obviously the teachers groups and public employee groups are very nervous about this. We took a very controversial vote to come up with the first, just a very modest reform to try and stop the bleeding, stop digging the hole worse every year. Pass the House, failed the Senate. If you believe in school choice, we had a proposal to say that you could get tax credits to create scholarships for poor kids in poor performing districts to go to private schools. Pass the House, failed the Senate. On eminent domain, we finally sneaked something through, and we can talk about that if you're interested. But for years, we had proposal after proposal to protect your property rights from the government. Pass the House, failed the Senate. Legal immigration. We have 15 different bills, including a better E-Verify bill. Just a whole list of things besides the two I already mentioned. Passed the House, failed the Senate. And so there we are. Every year, you send delegates down. My area sends the same. We have all these ideas we're very proud of. We think they would make Virginia better, safer, more conservative, more business-friendly. Give another one. Right to work. Right to work underlies our #1 business ranking. There's nothing more important in the entire list of laws we have to help us keep that #1 business ranking is the right to work law. It says you don't have to join a union to work. We said let's put it in the Constitution. Let's make sure that the General Assembly can't monkey with it. Pass the House. Failed the Senate. So again, anything you can do down the stretch, let's get Ron reelected. Let's worry about your local races, but anything you can do to help those senators, just get us 2 more senators, and we would really change Virginia and make it a better place. Okay. Now, I've got 2 other things I want to go over, and then I'll leave lots of time for questions. First, there are questionnaires, surveys. So many of you got them at home already. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you would just fill it out. If you would rather just get emails from me, I send out occasional emails about Crime Commission business. You don't even have to fill it out. Just put your email on there and give it to me when we're done, or you can mail it back to me. And the second, we can talk about this more if it's of interest. The big riddle for criminal law is not what you might think it is. The big riddle is that once we have caught somebody, once we have punished them, that person is likely to reoffend for a long time. And there are evil people in this world, and for them you simply have to lock them up, throw away the key, and leave them in there. But most of them aren't evil. Most of them are stupid, lazy, selfish, but not evil. And so what we have to do is find ways to convince them to stop breaking the law, to stop committing crimes, to stop victimizing people in this room. And I'll give you an example. This is a true story, and then I'll stop and take questions. So I'm a former prosecutor. I put a lot of people in jail, and when I go to jails or see jails, there's usually people in there that I know. And I was visiting our local jail, this was a couple of years ago, to see their drug program. It's how the inmates get their medication, not the other kind of drugs. And our jail is set up like most jails. You have the least bad offenders in one place, so that as you go down or up, they get worse and worse. So you start with the drunks and the shoplifters, and then you go to the sort of up your way till you get to the most violent offenders. And when this happened, I was in the room with the most violent offenders. And so I walked in, there was me, the nurse, I think it was a reporter, and 1 guard. And it was an open room like this, maybe 25 inmates. And I walked in, and the moment I walked in, a really hard-looking guy made eye contact with me. Just started staring, as they say, staring a hole right through you. And I didn't recognize him, but I did a lot of cases. They always recognize me, I almost never recognize them. So I tried not to make eye contact, and I stood a little closer to the guard. And then he started, and I don't know if everybody can see this, grinding his teeth together and just saying something under his breath at me. And I mean, this went on for 60 seconds, just staring me down, looking at me, staring me down. I kept looking over and standing close to the guard. And then finally, and I don't think there's any kids here, he started pointing at his trousers while he looked me in the eye and saying something under his breath. He's pointing down at his trousers. And I was really starting to get a little concerned. And again, there's 20 inmates. They're not locked up. There's no handcuffs. And 1 guard and me. And so we go on for a little bit, and finally the problem with them, like I said, is they all get out. This guy was going to meet me on the street one day. At least now I've got one guard. And so I sidled over to him, and he's still pulling at his trousers and grinding his teeth. And I get up to him and I said, yeah. And he said, your fly is open. So, it's a true story. He was trying to look out for me. What I'm getting at is, most of them are not evil through and through. Well, we have to convince them somehow to stop breaking the law. And I'm open to suggestions, and we've got all these good ideas in the Crime Commission we're working on. With that, I'd be happy to take questions about Virginia's criminal laws, eminent domain, General Assembly, or any other issues you might have. And I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Rob. We're going to start right here, Rob, with Brian.
Morning, Brian.
Hi, how are you? Can you talk a little bit about the Castle Doctrine and where we stand with it now,
Sure.
where you'd like to see it go?
That little refrain I was doing about pass the House, fail the Senate? No, pass the House, fail the Senate. The Castle Doctrine is basically the question of under what circumstances you can use lethal force to protect yourself in your own house. Do you have to wait till the bad guy does something specific? Do you have to wait till he does something violent? Do you have to retreat? Retreat means before you can use fatal force, you have to kind of back away and give him a chance to stop. The House is very conservative on this issue. We have passed, gosh, the last 3 or 4 years, I think, a bill every year to protect your rights, to make sure that you don't get sued, you don't get prosecuted, to protect you. And so far, it's passed the House and failed the Senate. It's another reason we need two more senators.
All right, next question, Steve.
Thank you, Delegate Bell, for being here. I've got it.
I forget. What are going to be the 1 or 2 top things you will be dealing with in this upcoming legislative session?
Gosh, the question was the top 2 things we're dealing with. Understand that the election in 2 weeks is going to make a huge difference. And if we have a Democratic Senate like we've had in the past 4 years, we will do what we always do, which is we'll bring a bunch of ideas that we would anticipate not passing. We've tried them before. Sal will bring his ignition interlock device just on the off chance somebody thinks differently about it. And then you bring other bills and you try to find some way, like the 2 bills I mentioned at the beginning, we found ways to get them passed. And by the way, even the sex offender one in schools didn't pass. It didn't pass the Senate. I had to use some complicated way, send it to the Crime Commission, get a consensus over there. And so what you do is you try to use all your legislative tricks and techniques to find something that the Democrats in the Senate will agree to. I think that with the economy and the situation that it's in the upcoming budget, that will have to be the primary argument we have. For all the cuts that have been made, and the budget is roughly at 07 figures today, it will have to be cut further absent some crazy, it's 2 months away. So the governor's already sent down to the agencies, what would you not like to cut, but if I said you need 2%, 4%, I think 8%, but what would be the next things that you cut out? And so that'll always be the biggest fight in a budget year. We have a 2-year budget cycle, and what that means is we project what we think the revenues will be, we build a budget based on it. After 1 year, we adjust either up or down based on what actually has come in, and obviously right now the projections are very bleak. So.
Next question, Rob, is back here.
Yes, sir.
What do you think about our senators, our federal state Senator Webb's proposal that got shot down this week in the Senate?
Which one?
The one on crime, changing the crime, some sort of commission. He wants to have 14 guys that that think about it again.
Yeah. I could just talk.
You're good, Ron. It's just I'll keep it off.
The question was, Senator Webb is trying to put together a commission to study crime from top to bottom. There are 2 related but very different criminal systems, and it matters for the question, and I'm sorry to get technical, but it matters to what he's trying to do. The state system is what we control. The state system, the vast majority of people in the state system are violent criminals. We do have some drug offenders in prison. At last count is 15% of the people currently serving prison time are drug offenses. And so most people think that's the way we ought to be prioritizing our energies, should be on the people that rape and rob and murder and that kind of thing. The federal system is very different. They don't have the same laws we have, and so a lot of the issues you hear about somebody having a very modest amount of a drug and it's a simple possession, they weren't dealing, and all of a sudden they're serving an 8-year sentence, that doesn't happen in the state system. It does happen in the federal system, and so they're trying to look at that and see if that's how they want to spend their resources. My concern with the commission is it appears to me they're staffing it, or they were stuffing it rather, with people who don't believe in my first two principles, which are hold the criminal accountable for what he did and keep the public safe. There's a whole, there may not be anybody in this room, it might be a third of you, but there's a whole other approach to the criminal justice system which says these poor people, they had a bad break in life, and our goal should be to try and fix them. And let me tell you, as a former prosecutor, I have had people not be the guy who's scary. I've had people come up to me and say, thank God I've turned things around. I just wanted to let you know. And then actually, I'm not being funny. That makes you feel great inside. You go, thank goodness. At 20, you were a knucklehead. At 30, you're raising your kids. You got a family, you got a job. But I became very skeptical about our ability to do that until they wanted to. And oh gosh, every do-gooder group would come through and they'd have some system, some program. Aside from the Marines, I never saw one that worked. And we all laugh when we say that. Actually, the Marines do a pretty good job with some of these young kids who don't have much direction, and they give them a direction and go march that way. And by the time they get back, they're in a better place. But I'm not optimistic that this commission will have the same goals as a commission that I would want to be on. I think that they're looking for other purposes. So.
Next question, Roberts.
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about the castle doctrine.
Yes, ma'am.
What is the current law? Do you ever got someone breaking?
That's one of the reasons. That's a complicated question, and one of the reasons I want to put it in statute is because it relies on case law, which means the courts have decided. I'm very hesitant to give you all legal advice on this. I know more than I need to, not less than I need to. The prosecutor in me says that no jury would convict you in your own house if somebody was breaking in. There is some case law that is supportive, but I'm very hesitant to say that because you act on it, something bad happens, and then saying that Rob Bell said it on 8:30 morning on October 22nd doesn't provide you any protection. So.
But is there a law specifically?
No, we're trying to pass it. That's what we keep trying. No, what it is. The Virginia courts have not been unprotective. So I don't want to make it sound like we're Massachusetts or Vermont. Actually, I think Vermont's actually pretty good, but we're not Massachusetts. But we don't have in the current law of Virginia a place you can look up and see what your rights are, and that's what we keep voting for and trying to pass.
You're next.
Yes.
There's actually, by the way, a controversy that our law, details that you need. There's some thought that the judges actually have it in a pretty good place. We need to be very careful not to compromise from that and make you have fewer rights rather than more. So far, we just keep passing a good one and it dies in the Senate. But one of the reasons some people say, well, why don't you work out a compromise? Why don't you make a deal with the Senate? This is one you don't want to, because the courts, well, no, but some of them you have to. This one, the courts have not been unprotective, and I'm trying to be very lawyerly about it, but the courts have been pretty good about it. We don't want to make it worse just to have something on the books.
But prosecutors, it's their decision to prosecute you, that's the expensive.
Well, and there's two levels. The prosecutor gets to decide whether or not to bring charges, and the jury can always acquit you. Those are the dual protections you have on your law. Yes,
thank
ma'am.
you. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
That's a good plan to treat criminals. But what about the victims? There seems to be a lack of assistance for the victims of crimes. And sometimes one crime can destroy a life. I'm interested in specifically my son was a victim of a hit-and-run accident. And he doesn't have a car accident license, and all this complicated. So are there any funds available, or what is your stand on the victims of crime? Actually,
on that very issue, and it may be because of you, I don't know. There's something called the Victim Impact. There's a fund for victims. It's not a lot. It's obviously the number of victims and the damage they've received exceed. You could pay every penny Virginia has and not make people whole. There is a Victim Impact Fund which handles things very modest. It's funeral costs, medical bills, things like that. Again, it's not by any means making people whole. One of the issues right now is hit-and-run cases. Literally, that issue is one of the issues they're looking at. And it's a modest fund. They get money from each case that goes through. They get a little bit from the clerks. And what they're trying to weigh is, can we afford? Is hit-and-run something we can add to the list? And in fact, we would anticipate, give me your card afterwards or something afterwards, because it might literally be an issue that we're working on today. She met with me a few weeks ago, and she says she thinks they can include hit-and-run. And my only question was, great, but are you sure? Just make sure it's not going to bankrupt the fund, so the next time a rape victim needs to have something, there won't be any money there. And she says they think they can handle it. So,
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And it's a fund of last resort, meaning just what you think. If the person has insurance, the insurance pays first. This is the last. Uninsured person does something awful to you. You need medical bills. You can't pay them. The state tries to help you out a little bit. Yeah.
Let's try this mic one more time. Steve?
I also thank you for coming.
Sure.
You have a question in here in your survey about appointment of judges in which you pose two alternatives. One is that the legislature, in reviewing a reappointment, should examine the individual rulings of the judge in determining whether to reappoint him or her. The second option is that you confine yourself to the general philosophy of the judge and presumably whether there's any moral issues involved. What is the current state of the law? How is the legislature currently advised, and what is your own position?
Sure. Okay. So the question is on judicial appointments and reappointments. Let me give it. This is probably pretty obscure. Let me give you just 60 seconds of how it works now, and then I can talk to you about the specific issue. When a judge comes up before the General Assembly, we the first time we appoint them, and then 6 or 8 years later, based on I guess 12 if you're on the Supreme Court, you come up for reappointment. And in theory, you go right through the same process again. You come back before the General Assembly. You have to be approved by the General Assembly. The governor does not play a role. You have to pass the House and the Senate. When they first come up the first time, it's very hard to do. The questions are very hard because they know what we want to hear. And you say, you know, what's your position on this? And they try to figure out what you want them to say, and they just say it. However, upon reappointment, that is when we have a chance to actually look at their record if we choose to. And right now, there's no rule. Each delegate makes up his own mind and decided this is a judge I want to reappoint. What has brought this to a head is a very specific legal ruling, and there's been a very hot controversy in Richmond for the last 12 months over this. And the specific ruling is a case called Hernandez. And Hernandez says that a judge can take a case under advisement, which means kick it down the road any old time he wants for any old reason he wants. And you might say, well, that's just scheduling. Why is that a big deal? The problem is we have mandatory minimum sentences, you've got victims waiting for their justice, you have all these things, and we have all these rules in the law, and all of a sudden the courts have started kicking it down the road for a year, kicking it down the road for 2 years, and then dismissing the case. The Supreme Court said they can, and so when this decision came down, all of a sudden, at the next reappointment, we started asking them, all right, you can, will you? And that's the genesis of the controversy. Right now, I believe we have not just the right, but the responsibility to ask them about specific rulings.
Absolutely.
There's an alternative view. Let me just, so nobody misunderstands, and you may have this view, that's unfair to judges. You're picking one case out of 300, probably 3,000, and you're asking them questions about that one case, and you really just need to ask them, Judge, what do you feel about law and order? What do you feel about drunk driving? What do you feel about... And I just think that doesn't help us much. We've done that. I've done that for 10 years, and every judge gets up there, and they sound reasonable, and they sound thoughtful, and by the time they're done, the Democrats and Republicans all could vote for them. And these are issues that often that shouldn't be the case. One of us should be upset with them. And so my preference is the ask them specific questions approach. It takes a lot more time.
Next question, Rob, is from Crystal.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, how are you this morning?
Hi.
You had mentioned that there is a law to keep sex offenders out of schools, which I think is great.
Okay.
Obviously, the law doesn't stop them from doing things, otherwise they would not be sex offenders to start with.
Right.
Currently, there are no laws that state that volunteers have to have a background check.
Yeah.
So what do you think about that, and what can be done about that?
It's an unfunded mandate / cost issue for the schools is where it comes from, and the schools have told us, yeah, sure, if you want to provide the funding so that every person that walks through the doors has to have it, we'll do it. But otherwise, don't tell us to do it because you're not paying for it. It's been sort of their approach. One of the ideas behind this law was at the time, I think his name was Southern. You know, Mr. Southern knew he was a sex offender, and he went on there anyway. And the goal would be to try to set up a system where the sex offender, the one who knows, the one who's sure about his identity, knows not to do it, and if he does, he goes to jail. It's a class 5 felony, class 6 felony, it's up to 5 years in prison. We are certainly hopeful that this will address most of it. We just expanded it, by the way, to school buses, not bus stops, but school buses and off-site school events, with the same idea being that we want to make them stop. Now, there's nothing to stop an individual school district from doing it, but I'm sure they would say that, I forget how much it costs per volunteer, but you kind of want to have people come on, you want to encourage them to come on, and everybody's strapped for money, so I think those are the drivers.
I just don't think the law will stop the people who did it, because if the law stopped them, they wouldn't be sex offenders to start with. So that's the concern I have.
Well, again, I would say that many of the sex offenders, they fall into that evil category where it's not something that we can talk them out of or convince. I mean, you can stop a burglar. You can stop a robber. Actually, the studies show that there's no armed robberies after a certain age because people, men mostly, you get tired and old and you just don't have the energy to run into a liquor store anymore. It's true. It's true. You can look at the stats. It's really interesting how they are. 20, it's a lot of them. 30, there's a few, and by I guess 45, like my age, we're all done. In all sorts of ways. Whereas sex offenders, they don't age out. And what the studies would say is if you look at the graph of their offenses, it's much more of a line. We prosecuted a guy in his 70s on a walker, and he was enticing, he could no longer chase the kids, and so he had to offer them gifts and entice them into his house. He had a 5-decade record of sex offenses. He had a crime, and I don't remember what it was, but it was a crime we no longer have. It's one of these crimes from the 40s, and just, it was crazy. No, I mean, and I think that's why we have something called, it's called involuntary commitment. There's a commitment process whereby even after you're released, and this is very controversial, certain sex offenders that are such high risk to reoffend that we are convinced they're going to do it, we actually put them in a hospital afterwards. And everybody in this room ought to be concerned about what that means is, I mean, you're saying you've already served your sentence. On the other hand, we involuntarily commit other dangerous people, and that's how we've sort of created a system for involuntary commitment of sex offenders.
Next question, Rob, is from Jimmy.
Yes, sir.
I do the website for the party here.
Read your shirt is what I'm trying to do. Okay, very good.
Okay.
I won't say that. I won't read it out loud into the camera. If that's okay.
Everybody knows me anyway. I do the website for the party here, and I also work with other units around the region, so I get a lot of stuff coming in and out of my email box.
Right.
And one thing I distinctly remember saying was that up in Henrico, I think it was, or somewhere around Richmond, that there was some guy running on the Republican ticket and you endorsed the Democrat. Is that true?
No, not the Democrat.
Oh, okay.
I can tell you all about it if you want.
Okay, well.
Yeah, there's a guy running for the, Henrico County Council's attorney running for prosecutor. The unit, not the unit, the mass meeting endorsed somebody named Matt Geary.
Right.
And thereafter, the unit found stuff out about him that the unit didn't approve of. So it's not against the unit. It's actually the unit said, oh my gosh, we feel like you floated in here under false flag. They asked him to resign so they could find somebody else. He refused. The executive committee, the electeds in that area, asked him. Finally, Bill Janis, who is a delegate in the General Assembly and a Republican, said, all right, I'll do it. And so he is now running under the independent flag for that seat. I can tell you it's with the support of the Henrico Republicans, their executive committee, Ken Cuccinelli, Bill Bowling, Eric Cantor, everybody on down.
Okay.
And it's a terrible situation. I mean, it's everybody. I've been part of Republican units. I was a party chair. I was a precinct captain, so I've done this long before I got elected. And it's one of those worst case scenarios where somebody's got the R by their name, and you all conclude, holy cow, not only is he kind of wrong, not only do we have a second thought, which we often have, as you know, no, but a full-blown, he will really be bad. Mm-hmm. He will be a bad prosecutor, and he'll be the Republican bad prosecutor, and he'll be our fault. And under party rules, as currently constructed, there's no good avenue. Now, I think all of us could visualize the reason you don't want to make it too easy to have people just say, all right, we change our mind, you don't get the nomination anymore. Mm-hmm. And that's where we find ourselves. And again, I'm not happy with the choices before us, and I assume neither is Ken or Bill or all the other electeds who have chosen to support Bill Janis. I don't know that anybody cares what my support is, but I think they certainly care what Cuccinelli.
Hey, well, like I saw this email a couple weeks ago, and then your name come up, and I made the connection. I'm like, oh, okay. So,
no, that's what it is. And so you have two Republicans running, and I don't want to hide the ball. Bill Janis is a very close personal friend of mine. He was my seatmate. I'm rooting for him, not just, but the reason he's running as an independent is that reason.
Okay.
So. And Rob, correct me if I'm wrong. I just want to clarify this. That information about that gentleman, Gary, that came out after the fact, after he was nominated.
Yeah.
Right?
No, that was the problem.
Right.
Yeah, no, they...
And Janis, of course, is the minority whip. Isn't that correct?
Not anymore.
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry.
No, and Bill was on, it's actually, if you care, Bill was on a very sort of rocket ship for leadership. He was in the leadership right now. And there is no rational ambition reason why you take this detour into the Commonwealth Attorney's Office. So you might like it or hate it, but what Bill is doing is not for any personal gain or personal ambition. He is choosing to do something because they needed somebody to be the prosecutor in Henrico County.
Well, we don't pay our legislators to become wealthy. We pay them to legislate.
Right.
So, okay.
We'll take the next question from Dick.
Yes, sir. I'm cutting off on what Crystal said, and you said that sex offenders have a tendency to have straight lines because pedophilia is not curable, period.
Curable. That's right.
Not curable.
Right.
Is there any movement to make a pedophile a lifetime prisoner?
Yeah. We did it. The reason we have the involuntary commitment afterwards, in my belief, is that we didn't imprison them in the first place. And it's more expensive. I mean, to put them in a hospital where it's $100,000 per bed or more, prison is expensive, it's $22,000 a year. Yeah, a couple of years ago, Governor McDonnell had a bill that made it a second offense. First offense, which on probation, you serve your sentence, probation for life. Second offense, life imprisonment, period. It is not cheap, and in these tough budget times, we're making these choices, but no, I would certainly support that. I mean, if you've worked these cases, and I'm not by any means, I was in a small office of 2 people, so I was not lead. There are people who have done a lot more than me. No, if you've worked these cases, these are awful, horrible cases. And you guys may not be in this group, but there's a literature out there that most pedophilia are 14-year-olds whose 15-year-old boyfriend is bothering them, and isn't it awful that we're ruining somebody's life when his girlfriend looked? No, I mean, there are those cases. But there are, make everybody have a miserable day, but 12-year-olds, 8-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 2-year-olds. And it really is that bad. And yeah, I think that most of us would say that somebody that does that to a little girl, typically, or a little boy, needs to be taken off the street and put someplace that can never do it again. So yeah, I would certainly support that.
What about the death penalty?
We can't. We actually had a bill to propose that, and the Supreme Court has said that death penalty is limited to homicide cases. So I think it was a Louisiana case that did that. We actually had a bill a few years ago. It was a Delegate Gilbert's bill. My memory is we all liked the idea, and they came back to us and said you can pass it, but you're just wasting your time. The Supreme Court says you can't.
Rob, we're going to take a question from one of our former chairs, JP.
Hi, yeah, thanks for being here. The biggest issue that everybody in the room that knows me knows it is term limits. And I know, just out of curiosity, I always like to know what people's viewpoints are that are running for office. Do you support term limits on state and national levels?
So long as we are having churn, I don't feel as strongly. And so, I've been there 10 years. We use the license plate test. Everyone knows this, the lower down your license plate, the longer you've been there. So I'm 35, I'll be probably 29, so that means in 10 years you have 71% churn in the House. I don't know about the Senate. And in Congress, gosh, I thought it was not only a good idea, but necessary until about 06. And then since 06, we've had pretty good turnover up there. So I don't have real strong feelings either way. If people feel real strongly they want to have it, that's okay with me. I don't object to it.
80%.
Yeah,
96% of people in Congress get reelected.
Right, as opposed to, in our area, I've always had a competitive district, so it's not as, there are places that have had safe seats, but we've had one that, it's near Charlottesville, so it's purple, so it goes back and forth. But I don't have any problem with it.
We'll take the final question from Mary Lou.
Hi. There are people in divorce situations that somebody will accuse the other mate of doing something to the children.
Yeah.
Now those people are ruined, basically. Yeah. Is there any way to justify that type of label?
You ever hear the question? The question is, in divorce cases, sometimes allegations are made and the label is damning. I mean, yeah, there's two, let me sort of give you two thoughts on that. The first would be, these allegations are very, very powerful, because if they're true, I think most of us would say that person should be put in jail for as long as we can keep them there. If they're not true, it's the most awful allegation someone can make. And you see this with teachers from time to time, where the teacher goes through 3 years of litigation and it turns out at the end of it that the kid drops charges and was just mad because the teacher did something or punished him or something. No, I mean, there's no magic to this. You try to do everything you can to get the case. Sometimes there's DNA and it's easy. I mean, not to be too clinical or awful about it, but if there's certain kinds of DNA on a child, you know darn well that the guy did it. But in many cases, there's not. And, I remember very distinctly, we had a case. In criminal cases, you can rarely put on the guy's record. Most people know that, but in other words, we had a case where a 10-year-old made an allegation. Now, we knew he did it in part because he'd been convicted before, but the jury didn't. And so they were put on a case, and our only witness is a 10-year-old, and there's no DNA, there's no biological evidence, no confession. And they worked and worried and worried and worried, and they finally convicted. Then you get to tell them about the prior charge, because now they're sentencing, and you can actually see them exhale. They're like, oh, thank goodness we got that right. But they didn't know. Yeah. And it's very hard. It's very hard. I think that even the allegation itself can be ruinous. In other words, let's assume you're acquitted. It's what that, gosh, a long time ago, Ronald Reagan had a cabinet secretary. He said, where do I go to get my reputation back? You have this same issue. And so I mean, aside from, that's why we have a jury system, that's why we have prosecutors review it, that's why we have, I don't know of any other better way to try and figure out whether or not it's true. Now, false allegations are false allegations. That's actionable. I mean, you can be prosecuted for making a false report.
I've never heard of one that ever was.
I did it. I prosecuted people for it. I remember, in fact, it was a rape case. It was not like these facts. But no, we had a case where a girl made some allegations and she was just mad at her boyfriend. And then she got unmad at her boyfriend and didn't want to tell him what she did. And so all of a sudden we had people getting arrested, and that was a long time ago. But we prosecuted that.
One crime?
Well, in Orange, yeah.
No, I mean, just one case.
Yeah, I mean, Orange is 25,000 people.
Forever.
How many cases did you prosecute?
How many did I prosecute for false report? I can only recall one. No, I mean, it ought to be, in theory, it ought to be prosecuted as vigorously as other things, in part to stop people from making those allegations. This is a larger question. Civil law, which is what it is, you're talking about divorce law, doesn't do a very good job of keeping people from lying. Now, the criminal system doesn't do a great job, but civil law does almost no job. And between the courts and the prosecutors, nobody likes to worry about perjury cases, so you don't see many of them. But that would be the answer. I mean, if you could prove that somebody made a false report, you should follow up and punish her or him. I would agree. I mean, the law has it on the books. Perjury is a punishable felony. False report is that's typically done as a misdemeanor, but that's punishable. The judge in every civil case has the ability to punish or sanction somebody for making false allegations and charges. I mean, it's all there. Now you got to follow through. Now the real thing would be actually the harder case that we're not even talking about, which is that all the way to the end, she says he did it. Just there's never a chance where you prove that it didn't happen. She says he did it. I said I don't. You watch TV, you think those cases never happen. You think that it's DNA and other stuff. No, I can tell you, I mean, in an awful lot of cases, that is exactly what goes to court. There's no magic. You look them in the eye and you try to figure out who's telling the truth. That's what the jury does. But there's no other way to do it. I mean, if in fact he abused his children, not only should he not get the kids, not only should he pay more child support, he should go to prison. I mean, that's the problem. It's a very high stakes allegation.
So often they haven't done.
I would say sometimes they haven't. I don't want to argue with you about whether it's often or occasional. But sure, no, there are allegations that are not true.
Right. Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Delegate Rob Bell.
Thank you very much.